Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Thomas, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey, everybody, I'm so glad that you're with me today on the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. Listen, I've got some brand new friends with me, Brian Chung and Brian Chung. Yes, I said that correctly. One's with a Y, one's with an I. They're with Alabaster. Guys, I'm so glad that you're with me today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. I saw your story come by on Facebook the other day, and I was like, what is this? This is so great. Obviously, I'm an artist, and I was really interested in what you guys are doing with Alabaster. For those of you that have not heard of these guys before, they're really all about reimagining the Bible and how it could look in a contemporary setting when it's matched with beautiful imagery and really impactful design. And I can't wait to jump in to this story because you're both artists, right? I mean, you started like as legit artists. And how did that start for you, your artist journey?
Yeah, so a little bit about me, Brian with a Y. Went into college studying animation and film. So I grew up really liking like Pixar movies. And I really liked, I grew up painting and I grew up watching a lot of movies. And so I thought animation would be like a nice happy medium between those two things. And so that's what I started studying in college. And, you know, once you're in, it was at USC, so at the USC film program, right, you're doing a bunch of different things. And I was also part of a Christian ministry there. And, but those two parts of me, like the artist and sort of the Christian side, always felt a little separate. Like I would lead Bible study and then, you know, artists are notorious for going to studio late at night. So I'd lead Bible study and then go to studio right after. And they just felt separate. Like they weren't consciously connected anyway. And I was just interested in figuring out a way to connect those more. And so towards the end of my senior year, I read a book called Real Life by James Chong, who's a pastor out in California. And in the book, he talks about how each generation will ask a question that leads them to spirituality. And so in the past, he's talked about how those questions have been things like, what is true? What is real? He predicts that right now we're in a generation of what is good or what is just, given sort of the political climate in our country today. And he predicts that the next question that sort of millennials and younger generations are going to be asking is, what is beautiful? And we felt like that was just so true, right? If you look at millennial culture today, it's very visually based. Yeah. Everyone has a phone with a camera. We judge content based on how well it's designed. Right? We just consume a lot of visual media. And so we thought, oh, how could we kind of bring that into a faith-based space?
That's incredible. Now, Brian with I, how about you? Where did you start on your creative journey?
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I didn't grow up Christian. My parents are Buddhist, originally from Hawaii, but I was always into art, loved art, was into painting, drawing, and then slowly moved into graphic design. And then I was part of my high school's yearbook, doing art direction there, and went into college as a business major with a graphic design. The more formal name is communication design major, but it was mostly graphic design. Yeah. And just started studying those two things. Came into college agnostic. And so believing in spirituality and God, but not really following anything. And it was during the middle of my freshman year where I really started asking questions of who is Jesus as an adult, like not what my parents say, not what the media says about it, but like really trying to discover it as an adult by myself. And so asking questions, I bumped into some random folks who were super nice, and they happened to be Christian. And so they invited me to be part of a Bible study. And it was in that Bible study where God started to speak to me. And I was a little like, still questioning. I'm like, oh, is this a coincidence or not? And so I said, let me go back home to Hawaii, where I have no Christian family, no Christian background. And if God shows up, like, then you're real. And so I go back, God shows up, two of my friends become Christian. And I was like, all right, God, you're real. And so decided to follow him. And I remember getting my Bible for the first time. I went to a Christian bookstore, and I saw my friends had these nice leather Bibles. And so I was like, I want one. And so went out and grabbed one. And yeah, I think it was just different than the other things that I was sort of exposed to as someone that wasn't Christian or didn't grow up Christian. I remember I had my first marketing textbook, and it didn't look like a textbook. It looked like a magazine. And for me, I was like, this is the first time that I'm excited to read my textbook.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
All that changed was its design. And I think for me, I thought like, oh, the Bible, you know, it's an awesome story, a really beautiful story of who Jesus is. And I'm wondering, like, could it be designed in a way that was also a beautiful reading experience?
Yeah.
And so
It's so funny. I love that you guys even thought out of the box like that, because so many people, I think, would come to it and be like, you can't mess with the Bible. I mean, that's like the Bible, you know? And yet it's like the methodology always has to change, right? The message is true. The truth is always, it is eternal, but the way it's presented in culture always has to change. And I was just in Europe, I was sharing a little bit before, on a book tour, and got to see these incredible Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant churches, you know, that are from the 13, 14, 1500s, that are just incredibly painted and gilded with gold and all that. I mean, you're just like, the visual imagery is an impact when you walk in, is absolutely huge. And yet when we see the Protestant Reformation come on the scene, you see this kind of thing of, okay, all that's excess, throw the baby out with the bathwater, just give me the quote unquote truth, you know, 3 points and go home, as if it's just a list. And I'm like, that totally negates the the very essence of who God is, which is as artist and as giver of and essence of beauty. And so I love that you guys are starting to see that and explore it. When did you're kind of sharing now, when you started to feel that disconnect, but when did it become such a disconnect that you're like, I got to do something about this? Like, maybe God is calling me to change the way people read his word, because that's, I mean, what a huge calling and undertaking.
Yeah.
So you can go for it, Brian.
I think for me, I was reading a different book called The Glory of the Lord. It's a very theology heavy book that I only read like the first 50 pages maybe. But it's by a theologian named Hans Urs von Balthasar. And in the book, he's kind of touching on things that you're mentioning. Basically, he argues that there are sort of these three tenets or values, if you will: goodness, truth, and beauty.
Right.
And how those are, you know, fundamental to understanding who God is, and how, you know, beauty is kind of lost in those three values. Like, but that without beauty, the two other values, goodness and truth, like, don't really make sense. So he says, like, goodness loses its like attractiveness, and truth loses its cogency. And so for me, that was like really impactful. And as an artist, I was like, there's something that's really important there. I think also, like, if you look at kind of Christian culture today, the primary ways that we quote unquote experience God is through literary formats or word-based formats, right? So the things that come to mind are, we listen to sermons, We sing worship songs, and we read the Bible, and all those are word-based. But I think I think there's just a whole visual language or way to experience God visually that we miss when we hold ourselves to just those three kind of word-based ways of experiencing God.
I couldn't agree more. And of course, it's artists primarily that are listening to this podcast. So they're all out there going, yes, these guys get it. But you know, I've often taught this concept that I believe any kind of artwork that we create, whether it's, you know, visual or written or music or whatever, they become these intersection points through which the Holy Spirit can encounter our heart. And it's kind of like this trap door, you know, all of a sudden that this, like the secret message of the Spirit can begin to move through us. Because I think when you take all of the other things that so boggle and confuse our mind and all the traditional Christianity, churchianity rather, off of the table, and you present things in powerful visual imagery, all of a sudden they touch the heart in a way that just words or, you know, just teaching, that sort of thing, can't. Not that one is better than the other. They do different things. And I love that, because as I've been reading your story and hearing about what you guys do, you talk about this idea that great art creates dialogue. What kind of dialogue are you hoping happens with the Gospels that you guys have produced?
I think for us, I think the beauty of art is that it, like you said, creates dialogue. We aren't, so like, because we're artists first, we like art. What we care about is that you're responding to it somehow. And so whether that's positive or negative, I think we're less concerned about. What we primarily want is like for you to respond, you know, whether that's emotionally, spiritually, physically. We think that's the power of art. And so that's what we're excited by. I mean, in terms of sort of the, you know, responses that we've gotten, I think the stories we love the most are, you know, people who maybe don't consider themselves religious, who are, you know, picking up this book and being like, oh, this is like, actually, this is like, regardless of how I feel about God, like this is a great piece of work. And I'm going to interact with that because of that. It's, and I think, you know, it's changed the way that people are reading their Bibles, like in terms of, right, people are putting it on their coffee tables instead of a, you know, a common Bible might go on like a bookshelf or something. And so I think, for us,
I was even interested that you guys chose print, just because, you know, you're really reaching out to millennials. You know, this is an Instagram generation. We're all digital all the time. I said, you know, because I know for me as an artist, the tactile, being able to touch and feel something is really important. And so did you guys struggle with that back and forth? Like, as you talked about format, like, did you always know that it was going to be print, or did you wrestle back and forth whether it's going to be only digital or? Well, hey, there's Matt. And you know, one of the things that I found over the years in working with artists is that real lasting change in our life happens best in the context of supportive Christian community. And that's why I wanted to take this opportunity just to take a second and invite you to be a part of my online community called the Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Listen, this group is absolutely free, and over the years has actually grown to thousands and thousands of artists in just about every creative medium from countries all over the world. You know, the cool thing is that it's become a real place of encouragement and life for artists, just like you and me, who want to share their work, share their life, connect with other artists, and really pursue everything God has for us as artists in His kingdom. Now, listen, to join, all you have to do is just click the link in the show notes here and answer a couple of questions just to let us know that you're a real person, and bam, you're in, okay? So, listen, I can't wait to connect with you inside of my Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Do it now, and we'll see you there very soon. All right, bye.
We always knew it was going to be print. I think there's a lot of like thought out there that print is dead, but I think if you look at like sort of the specialty print scene, like art books and sort of indie magazines, print is very much alive. And so you're right. I mean, there's a completely tactile experience that we didn't want to miss out on. And so we, from the get-go, we're like, we're printing this. Like it's not a digital product.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think like as someone, that didn't grow up Christian, most of my experiences of excellent of art were very excellent. So like when I went to an orchestra, like it was beautiful. Like it was stunning. There was a excellence in their craft. When I went to a museum and I saw the artwork, there was an excellence in the paintings and the art that was designed. And I think for us, when we wanted to design the Bible, we thought like, hey, we want to like think about everything. Like, let's do this all excellently, and so that both Christians like would love it, but also particularly people who aren't Christian um, uh, will see this as like, if anything, this is a beautiful piece of art, and begin that conversation versus completely dismissing it. And so. I mean, like, for someone that is not a Christian to see just a leather Bible, like, I think it's just, it has certain, like, people respond to it in a different way.
Right.
But it's been really, really cool seeing like people using our Bibles to actually start conversation, using it to gift to people who left the church. And
Mm.
um, that's been really exciting for us to see. And people are talking about it. And so, as Christians and as artists, like that's what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. Interaction, right? Response. So
Yeah.
take me back to, it's one thing to have an idea. You guys are friends. You come together, talk about it. It's quite another thing to have the money to bankroll an idea and the organization and the logistics and all that. So, how did all that begin to develop? I know you guys, I believe I heard, did a Kickstarter to get started. And how did you see the community come behind you? And was that an overwhelming part of this that, like, did you have experience in that before? Because I think a lot of people, they have a lot of ideas, but when it comes to execution, that can be a major barrier for them. And you guys have moved through that beautifully and are into the execution stage of doing this stuff. So how did that process work for you?
Yeah. So I was working at, I was full time in campus ministry. So I was doing that. Brian was the other Brian was about to graduate, and he was also thinking about coming on with the ministry. And we began thinking about like, hey, like we're artists ourselves. How can we intersect art and faith? And I remember back to like my first experience as a Christian, like 7-8 years ago, and the idea came about like, hey, let's try make like design the Bible in this new and fresh way. And we were in like one of our community houses, and we told a bunch of people, and they got really, really excited about it. And like, okay, let's try to do this. And the other Brian, he started taking the lead and like how he wanted it to be designed, like what the name was going to be, sort of the whole thought process behind that. And me, as someone that has some business background, I was like, all right, let's actually try and do this. And so in retrospect, we did everything like incorrectly on how you actually launch a Kickstarter. And so typically what you would do is like, you would, start months in advance of like marketing and letting people know
Right.
about it, and generating emails and an email list so that your first day is this awesome, big, exciting day. For us, we emailed our friends like a week before saying like, hey, we need some feedback. Let us know what you think. And then we didn't even let a good amount of people see it until the actual launch day. So we were sort of secretive about it. We launched it, and we got an overwhelming amount of support from the people in our campus ministry. And so people started sharing it on Facebook. And then all of a sudden the campus that we're on, so the University of Southern California, they thought that I was interesting. And so they picked it up in their newspaper. And then
Wow.
afterwards, it was sort of like a snowball effect after that.
Now, were the donations a bunch of little ones, or were there some like big honking ones, or was it mostly just, $5, $10, that sort of thing?
It was mostly, I think it ranged from 20 to 75 was sort of the average donation amount. And I think what was really interesting for us was that, like, yes, a lot of our friends who are Christian and part of the campus ministry started sharing that like with everyone. But it was particularly interesting for us that like the non-religious press were intrigued by the idea and thought it was newsworthy. And so that really, I think, helped us out to sort of get the word out. And we ended up raising, I think it was $73,000. Our original goal was $35,000. And so at the end, we're like, okay, I guess this is,
we're doing this.
we're doing this. And so we were really bootstrappy about it. Like we only had 12 pages done in the entire like gospel set. That was what we launched with. We put together some covers. We went to like a local print shop that doesn't do books, but we just needed some samples. And we were able to raise our first, like, I guess, quote unquote, seed money to actually happen. And in 2017 was when so 2016 was when we launched the Kickstarter. 2017 was when we delivered our product. And even that itself was like a whole learning experience.
Absolutely. But I love that didn't stop you. You kept going. I think so many people get stopped in the process, and they think, oh, I can't do that. I can't do this. And it's like, no, if God births something in your heart, right, he's going to begin to open the doors, bring the provision as you need it. And I just love that you're seeing that now. What's on the plan for as you continue to go forward? Are you thinking the whole Bible, the whole New Testament? Is this project complete for you guys, or what do you feel like is the next step?
We're taking it day by day. So we just launched Proverbs about like 3 weeks ago now for pre-sale. And so that's the book we just finished. I actually have, podcast listeners won't be able to see it, but I have like sample dies or sample signatures of the book in my hand.
Delivered.
Just delivered. Right. So that's what we're thinking. We are, we're just exploring. We definitely want to do more books. We are thinking about Genesis next, but don't want to make any promises.
Yeah.
We're also just, exploring other things. So we have like an online blog that, interviews creatives in the field. We are doing a couple ebooks here and there that explore art and faith. And we're just kind of open to whatever God has in store for our next.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think each book is a whole process for us. So, as Christians, we want to have integrity with the text and make sure that like the things that we're coming out with are aligned with God's word. And I think also what we're thinking about doing for our Bibles is trying to illuminate certain things that we might miss as modern readers. So, as teachers of the Gospels, we know that there were some like structural things in the Greek, like some of the chiastic structure that we wanted to highlight a little bit more, to show like, hey, there are patterns and there are themes that you might not see. And so let's try to show that in our artwork. And so, for example, like in Mark, there's a pairing of the breaking of the alabaster jar and the pouring of the ointment. And then right next to it is the breaking of the bread and the pouring of the wine. And so that repetition is like some things that we think thoughtfully about as we make the books. And so it takes a long time to make it. Yeah. And so for 66 books, that's a goal of ours. But again, like that will take a long time. But I think similar to what Brian said, it's always been about like, hey, how can we continue to explore this intersection of art and faith? And so whether that's the Bible, whether that's, we're thinking about creating some liturgy. We're working with some other publishers to sort of create some devotionals with our Bibles. And so as a startup, we're always exploring new and different ideas. So it's been exciting for us.
That's great. I know artists that are listening now, they're like, how do I get involved if I wanted to submit work or something like this for this project? And maybe if they want to connect with you online. So where's the best place to connect with you and kind of stay in the loop of what I was going on with Alabaster?
Yeah, the best way. So we're always looking for new photographers and writers. And so there are a couple of different ways. One is through our Instagram. And so it's Alabaster_Co, CO. And they can also just email us at hello@alabasterco.com. And usually we'll just go through it and we'll see if it's a good fit or not. But that's how they can get involved.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And folks, as you're listening, please reach out to both of them at Alabaster and on Instagram, their website, see what they're doing, and definitely get behind them. This is an incredible project that brings together art and faith. And I'm so glad we had this opportunity to chat today, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt, for having us.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommeymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.